But without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Juliette Biao. Karibu sana Kenya.
Yes, asante. Should I say asante?
Oh, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Even better. Yeah. Now, United Nations Environment Program is situated right here in our country, Kenya. And you are having the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly. Yesterday, you did an interview. There was an interview, a press conference actually, in regard to the summit. Perhaps we can first of all listen to that, then we can get deeper into the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly Summit, right? Okay, I'm informed it's not yet ready, but perhaps you can start us off with the theme of this year's summit.
Thank you so much, Ben, for inviting me. This United Nations Environment Assembly is the 5th one, and it's being held under the theme, Strengthening Actions for Nature to Achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Mm-hmm. You know, nobody has predicted the COVID-19 pandemic. And studies really reported that this is happening because something has been broken between people and nature. And this United Nations Environment Assembly offers an opportunity for people to make peace with nature. Mm-hmm. So it will really focus on how we can, environment can play a central role to address the 3 crises: climate, nature, pollution. So this is why this session is particularly important, because we need to prevent people from future pandemics. We need to prevent people for future shock.
And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has, of course, changed how we are approaching the environment conservation. And of course, it has hindered some efforts of environment conservation. But before then, the PS yesterday did talk about something quite dire, that the country needs a lot of money when it comes to environment conservation, because we have really polluted our environment. But before then, let's first of all listen to that clip, then we get back to the discussion.
These are huge resources, but what are these adaptation measures and mitigation measures? One of them is to ensure that we address degraded forests. But as a matter of policy, under the 10% tree cover, we are now saying all infrastructure must be green. So as you do your infrastructure, you must make sure that you also provide for greening. We have to balance. We need settlement, we need land for infrastructure, but we also need forests. All our 2.59 million hectares under KFS, you will see that there's been a lot of pressure for land for schools, land for this, land for that.
What we have proposed to member states in terms of our strategic priority areas are 3-folds. One is climate change, second is nature, third is chemicals and pollution. We are thrilled that in all those 3 areas, Kenya has demonstrated, as a host country, but equally as a member state, strong leadership.
Yesterday, the PS did talk about the country needs about $60 billion for environmental conservation. And looking at what is happening right now in the country, we've seen rising water levels, and especially on our lakes. It's a big problem in the country. $60 billion is a lot of money, and especially for a third world country.
Yes, I concur with the Dr. I think it's Dr. Kipto,
yes,
who really mentioned that the country needs money. But it's really kind of surprising when we jump into talking about the need for money. Mm-hmm. First thing is about behaviors and mentalities. You know why we find ourselves in this situation of need of money? Mm-hmm. It's because, you know, the cost for inaction is what brought what has brought us to this situation today. But if we really work on preventive measures, you will find that, the cost for a curative action will be less than what we're talking today. While we're trying to recover from COVID-19, addressing this conservation issue, I think the big lesson we should learn is how do we really act in a preventive mode than in a curative mode. Yes, today the damage is so big that we need such a big amount of money really to recover. But by recovering, we will also at the same time really build the resilience for really to prevent future pandemics, and also to address, to continue this transformation that we've been doing by making the environmental dimension a central component of this transformation.
Indeed, you've brought up a very interesting topic, talking about, it's not about the money for now. Let's first of all put money aside. It's us. We begin with ourselves, from conserving our own environment. What are some of the things that make you say that we first of all need to befriend nature? How can we do that before we think about the figures?
As I mentioned earlier, we need to address the issues now, particularly looking at recovering from COVID-19. But at the same time, we need to learn a lesson that really we need going forward to respect nature. We need to change our behaviors toward nature. We need really to change our mentality. That, in the future, will reduce the cost for really the conservation measures that we are taking today.
And how has COVID-19 affected or hindered efforts any efforts in environmental conservation? Because this is a new, talking about perhaps 2-3 years ago, we didn't have the COVID-19 pandemic, and we also had challenges in conserving our environment. How was COVID-19 pandemic? Of course, there's the time that we all are in our houses, and of course, that cannot be very good when it comes to environment conservation. How has COVID-19 changed that?
It will be a mistake if we say that COVID-19 has directly changed, this ability to conserve the nature. But there's a fact there where, COVID-19 really has compromises the ability of nations and communities really to manage the nature in a sustainable way. COVID-19 has really helped us to really figure out our fragility, even from health perspective. And you see, when communities and nations found themselves in this kind of situation, especially in Africa, and when they are hit hard, they go back to nature, again, the nature. So I think going forward, as I said, reconciling with nature, respecting more the nature, and managing the nature in a more sustainable way will help us overcome the difficulty we are facing today.
Of course, there is a lot of pollution, and especially in Africa. Comparing how the situation that we have in Africa from the rest of the world, how is it here in Africa?
Look, pollution is the biggest killer. I think globally, pollution kills about 7 million people annually. In Africa alone, every year, pollution kills over 600,000 people annually. But what we should be really fearing with the COVID-19 is the risk for, increased generation of waste, including hazardous waste in Africa. we know that, the Bamako Convention
Yes.
prohibiting the import into Africa of waste was really trying to address those issues. And we've seen, even during COVID-19, how this import of hazardous waste in Africa is being escalated. The perfect example is Sierra Leone, Tunisia, and those are the cases that have been reported. There are cases that are unreported. So, this COVID-19 will really help us to reinforce, to enforce the Bamako Convention, to avoid, if we look at the waste that have been generated during COVID-19, we can really fear that those wastes being dumped in Africa.
Yes.
So we need really enforcement on the Bamako Convention to preserve the health of both people and nature in Africa.
And still on the Bamako Convention of 2018, it was talking about dumping of hazardous waste in Africa. That was exactly almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And now we are it's 2 years down the line.
Yeah.
Have we experienced any successes in the same?
Yes, I have to say that we are seeing some successes. What you mentioned in 2018 was the third COP, the third conference of the parties to the Bamako Convention.
Yes.
This just 2 years. Yes, the good news, even though we are seeing this escalating generation of waste in Africa, we've also seen the recommitment of African nations to this convention. As a matter of fact, we have 3 countries that have ratified from 2018. We have Morocco joining recently. We have Central African Republic. We also have there is another country that have joined also recently. There are 3 just in 2 years. If that recommitment can continue, I think we will preserve the health of both environment and people in Africa.
Unfortunately, Kenya is hosting the UNEP offices and hasn't signed it. But away from that,
it's not only Kenya.
Yes, it's a lot of
3 giants that we are really engaging with. Those are Kenya,
yes,
South Africa, and also Nigeria. I think this is not to say that other countries are not important.
Yes.
I'm looking at the volume of the waste that are generated. So if Kenya in particular, which is really what I will say, the world environmental kind of because the Kenya is hosting really the United Nations Environment Program, I think people are really watching.
Yes.
Yeah, Kenya. Yes. And if Kenya can really join the Bamako Convention, that will be fantastic in the post-COVID recovery phase.
And I saw your interview 2 years ago on the same. Unfortunately, it was in French. I just got a few words. But something was evident is that Africa has become a dumping site for hazardous waste, and that is why you held the Bamako Convention. And perhaps what are some of these wastes that are dumped here, and who are responsible for dumping all this here in Africa? Because if we had a summit and talking about African matters and hazardous dumping of, or it's our own problem as Africans.
Yes, I think what I used to say when I have the opportunity to do so is that, we should not really waste our time blaming, those nations which are dumping the waste in our country. We should blame ourselves, not enforcing the convention, not enforcing the law. If the law are enforced, I think we should find a way to reject those wastes. And it takes also a certain level of awareness of countries to get there. This is what we are currently doing as Entrusted Secretariat of the Bamako Convention.
Away from that, the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly that will be held virtually on the 22nd and 23rd of this month. Kindly touch on some of the things that you want to achieve in that summit.
Yeah. Thank you so much. The United Nations Environment Assembly is the highest decision-making body on the global environment. It meets biennially, to set the priorities on the global environment policy and also on the international law. This year, member states have agreed, due to COVID-19, to take a two-step approach. An online session that will be held from 22nd to 23rd of February will really kind of address urgent matters, including approving the medium-term strategy, the program of work, and the budget. This is the online session. But during the same online session, UNEP will be also launching a synthesis report on making peace with nature. At the same time, it is a very comprehensive blueprint to address those 3 key priorities that I've mentioned earlier: climate change, nature, and pollution. During the same online session, a leadership dialogue will be organized really to discuss how the environment will play a role to achieve sustainable development goal and also to build a more resilient and inclusive post-COVID world. So the second, UNEA 2 will resume in 2022, where member states will really discuss issues that require negotiations.
And looking at, we have had so many summits talking about climate change, about pollution, but we keep on seeing the climate change affecting us because member states are still not adhering to what they're supposed to be adhering or to all the conventions that have been signed.
I think we should not be stoning ourselves. Although we have not seen the progress that we are expecting, a lot is being done. And this is why it is important to really take the opportunity of, member state moving toward the recovery response to also kind of look at all those innovations that have happened during COVID-19. COVID-19 has affected us, yes, but COVID-19 also has offered the opportunity for us to really see where our fragility is, but also the extent to which we have been able to adapt quickly by innovating. Yeah? So the progress, of course, could have been at a higher level if we have not been affected by COVID-19. But there are things that are being done, especially in relation to our nationally determined contribution on climate change. Countries are making some effort that have to be really recognized. But is that the progress is not at the space really to counter the impact, the socio-economic impact and environmental impact of the COVID-19.
And perhaps away from that, today in the morning when listening to the news, the PS talked about here in the country, of course, there is a ban on plastic bags, but he's saying that the market is steadily rising. Is this watering down the efforts that we are doing to conserve nature and avoid pollution?
I don't think so. I don't think that it is watering down the effort. It's just that we need to to learn a lesson from this COVID-19 and see how best we can engage with businesses in this endeavors, because the fact that the private sector is all about profit, right?
Yes.
If we fail really to demonstrate to the private sector that the ban of plastic is an opportunity for them to make more profit, this is where we will fail. But I think that by really engaging more with the businesses and having a dialogue, it's a matter of win-win options. And I think that also the private sector need to understand that this planet is one planet for all of us, and that we are all in the same boat and should be really working toward the common cause.
Indeed. And UNEP flagship report, the Global Environment Outlook, or the GEO6 of 2019, it was actually explaining the health of the planet. Since 2019 and now, have we achieved perhaps what we had aspired to, at least to be more friendly to nature, or we still have a lot of challenges in the same?
I think this is where really UNEP is playing a central role, because UNEP really doesn't raise awareness for the sake of it.
Yes.
UNEP brings the science to really raise awareness, to say, this is the status, this is where we are, this is the objective that we set to ourselves. But the science is telling us that this is the situation if we don't act. And, these synthesis reports on making peace with nature will tell us what has been done so far, will tell the member state, and the effort that need to really make peace with the nature. So this synthesis report is a comprehensive blueprint which will explain also how progress on science and bold policy decision-making can really create a path toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and also a carbon-neutral world by 2050.
And looking at United Nations, of course, it's amalgamation perhaps of member states. Are you also working with the private sector perhaps, because they are one of the people who have been mentioned as being one of the polluters of the environment, other than your member states?
We cannot but working with the private sector. If you look at, after the adoption of the Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals, what was done is immediately really to cost. What needs to be done for us to really achieve the Sustainable Development Goals is about trillions and trillions. The ODA alone cannot really provide these financial resources. Then we need the private sector to fill the gap.
Yes.
The private sector, as I said, need to know that it is a win-win partnership. Yeah. So we must work with the private sector to fill the gap, and the private sector also understand that the battle is common. Yeah. And
what are some of the things that the member states should look forward to, and especially on the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly that will be on in the next couple of days?
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, for this first online session, the priority is really to approve the medium-term strategy that sets the vision for the role of UNEP in the coming years, and also the program of work and the budget. The member state also, you know, by adopting the medium-term strategy, they also really approved that, you know, the key areas that UNEP will be focusing on will be the climate, the nature, and the pollution, really to transform finance, business, and the digital space, while the implementation will still continue through multilateralism and innovation. So this will, you know, a successful online UNEA 5.1 will be, you know, what I've just mentioned. Then when UNEA 2 resumed in 2020, you know, member states will have the opportunity to discuss the substantive matters that require negotiations. Yeah.
And of course, we talk about survival for the fittest, but right now, looking at the environment, if we continue the way we are continuing, of course, the climate change and the pollution, we will be fighting for survival for the greenest. Looking at some of the even companies that are degrading the environment, we've seen them dumping. We've seen, actually looking at Nairobi River is actually in a very dire state. And looking at some of the companies have been mentioned that they are actually polluting the environment. Ignoring environmental conservation, could it be catastrophic at a later date, and especially wording of investors who really have a problem investing in such companies?
You know why we want to reach this worst case scenario? Given the rise in the global warming, given that this planet is one for all of us, you know, even the company at some point may need to demonstrate, you know, what are their efforts toward really ensuring the sustainable management of our nature. And this takes really the kind of label that they will be seeking if they want to be on the global market. This will force them to join us in this battle. And we also have the responsibility to help them with data, with capacity building, with awareness raising, for them to understand that, you know, going forward, we need to work together.
And of course, this summit, talking about strengthening actions for nature to achieve the SDGs, there are other related SDGs, and especially you've talked about no poverty, zero hunger. How exactly are we going to achieve this?
Look, I know that if you look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you will see that, you know, environment cut across all of them.
Yes.
From number 1 to number 7 and number 17, environment is really the centrality of it. How are we going to achieve it? You know, the world is facing this COVID-19. All the countries are drawing up, if they have not done so yet, the green stimulus package. I can speak to Africa as a director of you know, the regional office for Africa, that recently, during the 8th special session of the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, an African green stimulus program has been adopted.
Okay.
This will really help. Is really an innovative African-led initiative for the continent's, you know, response to COVID-19. I think it's this African Green Stimulus Program really propose immediate and urgent action to tackle, you know, the impact of socio-economic and environmental impact of COVID-19. It also proposed short to medium-term interventions, while at the same time it proposed longer-term intervention for a green growth entrepreneurial initiative and also creating of job in key sectors of green economy. This doesn't mean that we are trying to the African member states are trying to reinvent the wheel. No, this African Green Stimulus Program will enhance the green and blue economy initiative as well as climate change initiative that exists, so that member states, while really kind of moving toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goal, they are also kind of implementing the Paris Agreement and all multilateral agreement that they have ratified. So this African Green Stimulus Package will be really discussed by the member state, how they will really, in a swift manner, really move onto the implementation.
Indeed, and we are hoping for the best. You are watching Channel 1 News Check, and remember, we also have our viewpoint question that I kindly would want you to respond to. What more should be done to protect our trees, rivers, and safeguard against air pollution? What do you think should be done? Of course, I've seen Elijah Kimani wa Kandara. You're watching from Kandara, Idiru, Muranga. But let's first of all take a quick break. We'll be right back for your comments, suggestions, or even where you are watching us from. Kindly hit us up on all. Let's take that break.